The bailiff forced Clara's hands onto the table while the Duke of Ashbourne emptied her leather satchel before the assembled tenants. A carving knife, her wax ledger, and a brass copy of the ducal crest struck the wood one by one. Gasps spread through the hall. "You forged my seal to steal land from grieving families," the Duke said, his expression colder than the iron clasp around her wrist. Clara stared at the brass stamp she had never seen before. Someone had hidden it among her tools, but protesting would only make her sound desperate. Then the Duke opened her ledger and revealed a page recording wax delivered on the exact dates of the fraudulent orders. The trap was nearly perfect. Nearly. Clara leaned closer and smelled cloves beneath the honey. Ashbourne bees had never produced wax with that scent. Only one sealed object in the house carried the same unfamiliar mixture. The final unopened letter written by the Duke's mother before her death. If Clara could reach it before her hives burned, she might prove that the deception had begun years before anyone accused her. "Take her outside," said Mr. Gideon Rusk, the estate solicitor. "The constable can receive her after His Grace has destroyed the instruments of the crime." Clara looked up sharply. Rusk stood at the Duke's right hand, immaculate in a dark coat, one pale finger resting upon the forged eviction order. He had spoken of the hives as instruments, though no hive could press a crest into wax. More troubling still, he had not asked whether any stored wax should be preserved for examination. Nathaniel, Duke of Ashbourne, closed Clara's ledger. He was 37, broad-shouldered, and rigidly controlled with the severe stillness of a man who believed hesitation invited betrayal. "Every block of wax in her workshop is to be burned, every hive as well." A murmur of distress passed through the tenants. Clara's bees pollinated half the western orchards. Without them, the autumn yield would suffer, but no one dared remind the Duke while 3 dispossessed families stood beneath his roof, clutching orders that bore his unmistakable seal. "Your Grace," Clara said, "if the wax is evidence destroying, it serves the forger." His grey eyes fixed upon her. For a moment something uncertain moved behind their anger. Then Rusk unfolded the marked page of her ledger. Miss Whitmore recorded the deliveries herself. Here, here, and here. The dates correspond precisely. They correspond too precisely. Clara strained against the bailiff's grip. "My father taught me to number every rendering by hive harvest and weight. I never entered 3 deliveries in identical phrasing." "You expect us to believe someone forged your records as well as His Grace's seal?" Rusk asked. "I expect you to compare the ink." The Duke's gaze dropped to the page. Clara saw him notice that the disputed entries were darker than those surrounding them. Yet his jaw hardened as though recognition itself offended him. "You had custody of the book," he said, "and 12 people entered my workshop during the harvest, including yourself." The cruelty was not in his volume, but in his refusal to admit uncertainty before an audience. Clara had supplied Ashbourne Hall with candles and sealing wax for 7 years. She had treated stings on the Duke's stable boys, taught tenants to divide swarms, and saved 2 orchards after a bitter spring. None of it outweighed a brass stamp found in her satchel. The bailiff pulled her toward the doors. Her mother, pale and trembling among the tenants, took 1 step forward. "Please, Your Grace, the apiary is all we possess." Nathaniel's expression changed at the word mother, but only briefly. "The cottage will remain yours until the magistrate rules. I will not punish Mrs. Whitmore for her daughter's choices." Clara stopped resisting. Public gratitude would make his sentence appear merciful, and she would not help him disguise destruction as restraint. Outside sunlight lay bright across the courtyard. 4 labourers were already carrying straw toward the apiary beyond the kitchen garden. At their head walked Rusk's clerk, Peter Lyle, holding a written order that had somehow been prepared before Clara's satchel was searched. That was the first certainty she possessed. The accusation had not led to the burning order. The burning order had been waiting for the accusation. As the bailiff fastened the iron clasp around both her wrists, Clara turned toward an upper window of Ashbourne Hall. Behind that glass stood the late Duchess's locked writing room, Clara had entered it only once 5 years earlier, when a housemaid spilled lamp oil near a cabinet. She remembered the ivory box upon the desk, and the faint scent released when its lid was lifted. Old roses, dust, honey, and cloves. "Why are you looking at that window?" Nathaniel asked behind her. Clara faced him. He had followed without Rusk, and anger no longer concealed the doubt in his eyes. "Because your mother's last letter was sealed with the same wax as those orders." Every labourer in the courtyard became still. Nathaniel descended one step. "That letter has remained locked since the week she died." "Then open it before you burn my hives. No one has touched the contents of that room." "Someone has." Clara looked toward Peter Lyle and the order already waiting in his hand. "And whoever arranged this does not fear my arrest half as much as he fears what my bees can prove." A bell sounded from the apiary. One of the labourers had overturned the first hive, and thousands of bees rose into the sunlight like black sparks. Rusk appeared in the doorway. "Light the straw." Clara finally understood. The hives were not being destroyed because the Duke believed them guilty. They were being destroyed because somewhere among their wax stores remained a batch old enough to expose who had resealed the dead Duchess's letter. "Wait." Nathaniel's command reached the labourer an instant before the torch touched the straw. The man froze arm extended while bees swarmed above the overturned hive. Rusk descended into the courtyard. "Your grace delay gives her accomplices time to remove whatever remains. Then your clerk will seal the workshop," Nathaniel said. "Nothing is burned until I have examined my mother's letter." The solicitor's composure slipped for no more than a heartbeat. "That room has been closed by your own order for 12 years, and it will be opened by my order now." Clara heard the distinction. Nathaniel had not declared her innocent. He had merely refused to destroy evidence before satisfying himself. Yet even that narrow concession appeared to trouble Rusk. A low, furious hum rolled across the courtyard. The displaced bees had begun circling the servants, and one of the labourers swung his coat at them. "Stand still," Clara cried. "You will provoke them." The bailiff tightened his grip on her arm. "Keep silent. If they follow the Queen toward the hall, someone may be badly stung." Nathaniel looked at the darkening cloud. "Can you stop them?" "Yes, if you remove these." Rusk gave a humourless laugh. "She asks to be released within 20 yards of the orchard." Clara held Nathaniel's gaze. "You may keep 6 men around me, but choose now." He took the bailiff's key and opened the iron clasp himself. Clara did not waste the moment on gratitude. She crossed the yard, slowly lifted the overturned hive cover, and listened. Her father had taught her that a colony's disorder possessed different voices. Fear produced a high, ragged whine. Queenlessness produced a searching roar. Beneath a broken frame, she found the Queen crawling through spilled honey. Recognizable by her long abdomen and the small white mark Clara had painted upon her back in spring, Clara held out one bare finger and allowed the insect to climb onto it. "Bring me that empty skep," she told the youngest labourer. He obeyed despite Rusk's glare. Clara placed the Queen inside, covered the skep with linen, and set it beneath the shade of the garden wall. Within minutes the swarm began descending in a living curtain. No one spoke until the last thick cluster gathered around the Queen. "You could have run," Nathaniel said quietly, "and left 3,000 bees to die because you misjudged me." Clara answered, "I will not imitate your mistake." His face hardened, but he did not retaliate. Instead, he ordered the undamaged hives restored and placed 2 guards at the apiary gate. Clara was taken to the old honey room, adjoining her workshop, rather than to the village lockup. Her mother was permitted to bring water and clean linen, though a guard remained outside. The room smelled of wood shavings, dried lavender, and the sweet heaviness of wax stored through many summers. Mrs. Whitmore washed the red marks the iron had left upon Clara's wrists. "You should have fled when he released you, and confirmed every lie told about me. A ruined name can be survived. A prison fever may not be." Clara covered her mother's hand. The apiary paid for their cottage food and the medicine that eased Mrs. Whitmore's failing lungs. Escape would protect Clara for a day and condemn her mother for the winter. I will not leave you to answer for me. Her mother turned away, blinking hard. Clara opened the ledger Rusk had returned under guard. The forged entries imitated her careful script, but their author had copied only what he could see. Her father, Josiah Whitmore, had been both an apothecary and beekeeper. He had taught Clara to record not merely weight and date, but weather forage, colour scent, and melting behaviour. Those details allowed them to identify adulterated wax used in medicines and church candles. The disputed entries contained only weights. 4 pounds. A professional imitator had copied the appearance of commerce without understanding the substance. Clara turned to the final pages where she kept the private key to her marks. Each batch received a tiny symbol corresponding to its principal forage, a bell for bluebells, a star for borage, a crown for clover. None of the 3 false deliveries bore a symbol. A soft scrape came from the wall behind the drying rack. Clara moved the rack aside. A narrow wooden panel shifted inward, and Mrs. Agnes Finch, the late Duchess's former dresser, peered through the opening. I used to bring her Grace honey through this passage when she could not sleep, the older woman whispered. Mr. Rusk believes it was sealed. Why are you helping me? Because your father treated my son during the scarlet fever, winter, and accepted nothing but 6 apples. Mrs. Finch pushed a small cloth bundle through the opening. And because the Duchess trusted your family before she stopped trusting anyone in that house. Inside the bundle lay the burned end of a thick ivory candle. I took it from her writing room the morning after the old apiary fire, Mrs. Finch said. Her Grace told me never to let the steward find it. Clara brought the candle to her nose. Honey, smoke, and beneath both the unmistakable warmth of cloves. With her knife she shaved away the blackened outer layer. Buried inside the wax was a narrow band of blue silk, the same material used to bind the Duke's private correspondence. Footsteps sounded in the workshop. Mrs. Finch withdrew and pulled the panel closed. Through a crack in the door, Clara saw Peter Lyle carrying boxes from her shelves while the guard watched. The clerk consulted an inventory, lifted 3 sealed jars, and ordered them taken to Rusk's office. Clara examined the numbers written on their paper labels. They belonged to winter batches produced when no local flowers were in bloom. Her ledger recorded them as pale, nearly scentless wax. Yet the official inventory in Lyle's hand described those same jars as dark summer wax scented with clover. The false entries in Clara's ledger were not the only altered records. Someone had changed the estate inventory before the forged orders ever appeared. The workshop door opened again, but this time Nathaniel entered alone. He carried Clara's leather satchel and closed the door behind him. Lyle has taken 3 jars to Rusk's office, Clara said. I ordered them moved to the locked evidence cabinet, on whose advice his silence answered her. Clara placed the blackened candle on the table. Nathaniel recognized it immediately. His hand tightened around the satchel. That stood beside my mother's bed. The morning after the apiary fire, his eyes lifted to hers. Where did you get it? From someone who feared Mr. Rusk would destroy it. If you expect my protection, give me the name. I have not received your protection. I have received a locked room instead of a prison cart. The rebuke struck cleanly. Nathaniel set down the satchel without defending himself. Clara pointed to the silk embedded in the candle. Your private correspondence is tied with blue ribbon. My mother chose that colour. The household continued the custom after her death. Who controls the supply? The estate office. Then anyone entering that office could obtain it. The weave may tell us whether this strand came from an older length or a new one. Nathaniel examined the scorched wax. You can distinguish ribbons by looking at one thread, not reliably, but wax remembers what touches it. He regarded her with open skepticism. Clara took 2 candles from the shelf. One was pure beeswax. The other had been diluted with tallow by a dishonest supplier years earlier. She cut a shaving from each and placed them in separate spoons above a small spirit lamp. The pure wax softened slowly and released the scent of summer clover. The adulterated shaving melted faster, leaving a greasy ring around the spoon. My father taught me because wax was used in salves as well as candles, she said. A poor mixture could ruin medicine or cause a chapel candle to smoke. Colour may be imitated, scent may be concealed, but melting behaviour, ash, and the fragments trapped during rendering are more difficult to falsify together. She held the blackened candle near the flame without melting it. Clove emerged beneath the smell of smoke. Nathaniel's face altered. My mother hated cloves. Then she did not request this mixture. A knock sounded. The guard announced that the 3 evicted families were being removed from the servants' hall. Their carts had arrived and rain threatened before evening. Clara extinguished the lamp. Give me one of the orders. You are still accused of making them. Then watch every movement I make. In the great hall, Rusk waited beside the 3 documents. The tenants stood near the doors, the elderly Mrs. Hale, the Cooper brothers, and Thomas Reed with his pregnant wife. Their possessions had already been loaded onto open carts. Nathaniel placed the earliest order before Clara. You may remove 1 fragment from the edge of the seal. Nothing more. Rusk stepped forward. Damaging it will make later examination impossible. A true seal does not become false because a grain is missing, Clara said, but a false seal may become understandable. She warmed the point of her carving knife over a candle and touched it to the underside of the red wax. A sweet, sharp scent rose at once. Cloves, Nathaniel said. Clara scraped the softened fragment onto white paper. As it cooled, a greasy border spread around it. Tallow, she said. My sealing wax contains beeswax, shellac, resin, and pigment, never animal fat. Tallow blurs fine lines when pressure is applied. She placed the genuine ducal seal beside the impression on the order. The lion's left eye was crisp on the official matrix, but swollen on the document. A narrow channel beneath the crown had disappeared entirely. Nathaniel examined the remaining 2 orders. The same defects marked each crest. How long would it take to produce a copy, he asked. Longer than it took to hide that brass stamp in my satchel. But the copy was not made from memory. Its errors follow the genuine seal too closely. Rusk's voice remained calm. At most, she has proved that her accomplice mixed the wax poorly. At most, Clara replied, I have proved the wax did not come from the batches recorded in my ledger. Nathaniel looked toward the waiting families. Their removals are suspended. Your Grace Rusk said the new leases have already been promised. Then disappoint whoever received the promise. Mrs. Hale and the Reeds returned to their cottages today. The Cooper holding remains untouched until every order has been examined. Relief broke across the tenants' faces. Thomas Reed caught Clara's gaze and bowed his head. The victory was narrow and temporary, but 3 families would sleep beneath their own roofs. Rusk gathered the documents with controlled precision. Miss Whitmore has given an impressive performance. She gave an examination, Nathaniel said. I witnessed it. For the first time, the solicitor looked at Clara not as a convenient culprit, but as a dangerous obstacle. Nathaniel took her to his private study, where the authentic seal was kept inside a rosewood cabinet. Only he, Rusk, and the senior secretary possessed keys. He unlocked the inner drawer and lifted the heavy silver matrix by its ivory handle. Clara saw red residue caught inside the lion's mane. Do not clean it, she said. Nathaniel's brows drew together. Why? She warmed a needle, loosened 1 grain, and placed it on paper. Even before it melted, cloves scented the air. When did you last use this seal? 6 weeks ago on my sister's marriage settlement. This wax is soft. It was pressed recently. That is impossible. The cabinet has remained locked. Clara examined the drawer. A small rectangle of dustless wood marked the place where something narrow had rested. Near the hinge lay a broken sliver of pale feather cut flat at one end like the trimming of a writing quill. Peter Lyle used pale goose-feather quills. Clara had watched one move behind his ear as he carried away her jars. Before she could speak, shouting erupted in the corridor. A servant burst into the study. Your Grace, the evidence cabinet has been opened. The 3 wax jars are gone. Nathaniel turned toward Rusk's office. Clara looked down at the fresh clove wax trapped in the Duke's supposedly untouched seal. Someone had not merely copied his authority. Someone inside Ashbourne Hall was still using it and had begun destroying anything that could prove how. Nathaniel reached Rusk's office before the servant finished explaining. The evidence cabinet stood open, its lock undamaged. 3 circular marks showed where the wax jars had rested upon the middle shelf. "Who has a key?" Nathaniel asked. Rusk entered behind them, followed by Peter Lyle. "You, myself, and Mr. Lyle. I have not opened it." "Nor have I," Rusk replied. All eyes turned toward the clerk. Lyle's face drained of colour. "Miss Whitmore told me the jars would spoil if they remained in a warm cabinet," he stammered. "She said they must be taken to the stone cellar." Clara stared at him. "You removed them before I was brought from the honey room. I heard you instruct the guard." "The guard was outside my door." "Ask him." Rusk's expression conveyed regret rather than accusation, which made it more dangerous. The man was dismissed from his post 20 minutes ago. He admitted falling asleep while guarding her. Nathaniel looked at Clara. "Did you leave the room?" "No." "Can anyone confirm that her mother could, but only for part of the time?" "Missa." Finch had seen her through the hidden panel, yet naming the older woman would place her in Rusk's reach. "No one who should be dragged into this," Clara said. Nathaniel understood that she was withholding something. Disappointment settled into his face, though he did not press her before the others. "Search the cellar," he ordered. The jars were not there. Clara examined the empty cabinet. A thin crescent of pale wax clung beneath the shelf, scraped from one jar as it was removed. She touched it with her fingertip. It was still cool and firm. "They were never taken near a fire," she said. "If they had gone through the kitchen passage, this shaving would be softer. The ovens have been burning since dawn." Lyle swallowed. "Perhaps the outer corridor. The outer corridor leads past the porter. He would have seen you carrying 3 jars." Rusk stepped between them. "We are wasting time on servants' routes while the criminal herself remains free." Clara noticed a smear of white dust on Lyle's right cuff. Not flour, as it lacked the fine softness of ground grain. She rubbed a trace between her fingers. Lime. Nathaniel followed her gaze. The estate's candle cellar had lime-washed walls to discourage damp and vermin. Its entrance lay beneath the chapel, reached through a narrow stair that bypassed both kitchen and porter. They found the jars behind a crate of altar candles. 2 remained sealed. The 3rd had been opened and half its contents were missing. Lyle leaned against the wall as if his knees had weakened. "I only moved them because Mr. Rusk said." The solicitor turned with perfect astonishment. "Take care, Peter." The warning was gentle. Lyle immediately lowered his eyes. Nathaniel opened one intact jar. Miss Whitmore Clara examined the wax. It was pale, nearly ivory, with no clover scent. Her original label had been covered by a newer one describing dark summer wax. "This is my winter rendering," she said, "exactly as recorded in my private key. The estate inventory is false." Nathaniel faced Rusk. "You approved that inventory. My clerk prepared it. I signed hundreds of entries. And now your clerk removes the evidence." Lyle's lips parted, but Rusk answered first. "Which proves that corruption has entered my office. I will conduct a complete examination and report every irregularity personally." By evening, that account had become the official version. Rusk summoned the principal tenants to the Great Hall and announced that his inspection had uncovered serious discrepancies in the wax accounts. He claimed that, acting from an abundance of caution, he had advised the Duke to suspend all disputed evictions. Clara stood at the edge of the room under guard while the tenants thanked Rusk for his fairness. Nathaniel watched from beside the fireplace. When the gathering ended, he called the solicitor back. "What causes tallow to spread around melted wax?" he asked. Rusk hesitated. "Contamination, I assume. And why does a poorly mixed seal lose the channel beneath the crown?" "I am a solicitor, not a chandler, yet you told the tenants your inspection uncovered the discrepancy." Rusk's smile thinned. "Would you prefer that I announce Miss Whitmore's authority over your household while she remains accused of forging your name?" Clara expected Nathaniel to accept the argument. Instead, he said, I would prefer that you not claim another person's work. The room became very quiet. After Rusk left, Nathaniel approached Clara. The fading light softened the severity of his face, but not the shame beneath it. You saved those families from an order carrying my seal, he said. I delayed their removal. They are not safe yet. No, but I should have credited you before them. You should have listened before placing irons on me. His gaze fell briefly to the marks on her wrists. Yes, the plain admission unsettled her more than an excuse would have. Nathaniel led her upstairs to the late Duchess's writing room. Outside the locked door, Mrs. Finch stood with a ring of household keys. Rusk emerged from the adjoining corridor at the same moment and stopped when he saw her. My mother's dresser has no reason to be here, Nathaniel said. Mrs. Finch trembled. Clara stepped forward before the older woman could answer. I asked her to bring cleaning cloths. The dust may show whether the door has been opened. It was a poor lie, and it placed responsibility entirely upon Clara. Rusk looked pleased. So Miss Whitmore has been directing servants while under confinement. Nathaniel's eyes moved from Clara to Mrs. Finch. He knew she was protecting the woman, but he dismissed her without revealing it. When they were alone, he unlocked the writing room door. You risked your remaining credibility for her, he said. She has less power to survive suspicion than I do. You are facing imprisonment, and she is an elderly servant who depends upon this house for shelter. For the first time, Nathaniel looked at Clara without measuring her as either suspect or useful witness. He looked at her as if courage had taken a form he had failed to recognize. Inside the room remained covered in white holland cloth. The ivory letterbox rested upon the desk, its small lock intact. Nathaniel did not open it. His hand hovered over the lid before falling to his side. My mother was accused of selling confidential letters to settle her brother's debts, he said. She denied it until the day she died. I believed her, and the evidence humiliated us both. Since then I have trusted what can be locked, witnessed, and controlled. Locks have keys, Clara said softly. Witnesses can be frightened, and control is useful to anyone who persuades you to aim it at the wrong person. Pain tightened his mouth, but he did not turn away. A crash sounded below. Clara hurried to the window. 2 constables were crossing the courtyard toward her cottage. Rusk stood beside them, holding a signed search warrant. In the apiary, Peter Lyle was already pointing toward the small medicine chest that had belonged to Clara's father, the one place containing enough resin, pigment, and carving tools to make the accusation against her appear complete. Rusk no longer intended merely to take credit for her discovery. He intended to ensure she would not be present to make another. Nathaniel reached the courtyard as the constables entered Clara's cottage. He could not revoke a magistrate's warrant merely because the search displeased him, but he ordered every object removed to be listed before witnesses. Rusk selected the witnesses himself, the parish constable Peter Lyle and Mr. Barstow, a tenant who had lost money when one of the forged orders was enforced. None had reason to favour Clara. Her mother stood beside the cold hearth, while drawers were emptied and bedding pulled apart. Clara remained near the door between 2 constables. She could endure strangers handling her clothes. Watching them open her father's medicine chest required greater restraint. The chest contained tools he had used for 20 years, knives, moulds, scales, mineral pigments, resin, dried herbs, and a small bottle of clove oil prescribed for toothache. Every innocent object now resembled part of a forger's workshop. Rusk lifted the bottle, the scent found in the fraudulent seals. My father treated half this village with that oil, Clara said. Peter Lyle removed 3 coils of blue silk ribbon from beneath a tray. Mrs. Whitmore gasped. Those are not ours. Rusk placed them beside the bottle, and the ribbon used for his Grace's private correspondence. Clara looked at Nathaniel. The silk is new. The strand inside the burned candle is at least 12 years old. Can you prove that without the candle? Rusk asked. The candle remained hidden beneath Clara's apron. If she surrendered it, Rusk would control the only physical link to the old apiary fire. She said nothing. The constable reached into the deepest compartment and withdrew a folded packet sealed with plain wax. Inside lay 6 blank eviction forms, a practice sheet covered with impressions of the ducal crest, and a letter bearing the late Duchess's signature. Nathaniel took the letter. It was addressed to Clara's father. "Mr. Whitmore, the accounts confirm my fears. If my son learns what I have done, he will never forgive me. Destroy the old wax and say nothing of the payments." The Duke read it twice. Whatever fragile trust had begun between him and Clara vanished behind a practiced stillness. Clara held out her hand. "Let me examine the paper. You told me my mother trusted your family." "She did. This says she paid your father to destroy evidence. It says someone wanted you to believe that. Every document that condemns you is false, yet every object you produce is true." His words struck harder because they contained a reasonable man's exhaustion. Clara saw the choice before him. To trust her, he would have to reject his own mother's signature, the contents of her father's locked chest, and witnesses whose testimony agreed. He was not ready. "Look at the fold," Clara said. "Please." "Your mother's private letters were folded inward twice before sealing. Mrs. Finch will confirm it. This was folded once." Rusk turned to Mrs. Finch. "Were you present when the Duchess wrote every letter?" "No, sir." "Then she can confirm nothing." The constable discovered a shallow compartment beneath the chest lining. From it he lifted the missing half of Clara's dark winter wax and a silver-handled tool carved with the Duke's lion. It was not a complete seal. It was a punch used to repair the finest details of an imperfect impression, the lion's eye, the crown, and the narrow channel that Clara had identified in the great hall. Mr. Barstow recoiled from her. She knew the defects because she made them. Clara looked at the tool and understood the design of the trap. The crude brass copy in her satchel explained how the main crest had been pressed. The smaller punch explained how its flaws could be corrected. Her own testimony had prepared everyone to appreciate the significance of both. Rusk had allowed her one successful demonstration so that the next discovery would condemn her more completely. Nathaniel's face had gone pale. "Did your father possess this tool?" "No." "Did he receive payments from my mother?" "Never." "Can you account for the letter?" "No." Each answer tightened the case against her. The constable approached with the iron clasp. Nathaniel did not stop him. Clara's mother stepped between them. "She remained here to protect me. She could have fled." Mother Clara said gently, "You saved their orchards. You saved their children from fever. Tell them." Clara embraced her before the constable pulled them apart. The iron closed over the same bruises it had made that morning. Nathaniel flinched, but still did not intervene. That was the harm his doubt caused, not the accusation itself, but his decision to let other men convert uncertainty into punishment. As Clara was led away, the late Duchess's false letter slipped from Nathaniel's hand and landed near her feet. Its broken, plain seal faced upward. Embedded in the wax was a tiny crescent of green. Clara stopped. "Your Grace." The wax contains verdigris. Rusk bent to retrieve the letter. Another convenient observation. "Verdigris forms on copper. My father used iron scales and pewter moulds. There is no copper tool in that chest." Lyle quickly folded the document. The constable pushed Clara toward the cart, but she had seen something else inside the packet, a narrow strip of paper covered with columns of figures. At the bottom appeared the words Ashbourne Bond, Michaelmas noon, followed by the next day's date. Her forged ledger entries recorded wax deliveries on 3 dates. Those same dates appeared beside 3 payments on the strip. The eviction orders were not the main crime. They were trials proof that counterfeit instructions bearing the Duke's crest would be obeyed without reaching him. Tomorrow at noon, a far larger document would be presented. Clara climbed into the prison cart and turned toward Nathaniel. They were practicing with the tenants. He stepped forward. "What do you mean?" "The wax entries are payment dates. The final payment is due tomorrow." Rusk ordered the driver onward. As the cart lurched through the gates, Clara saw 2 black travelling carriages approaching Ashbourne Hall from the London road. Men in formal coats sat inside, carrying document cases marked with the crest of the Court of Chancery. Whatever had been prepared with the Duke's stolen seal was no longer hidden inside his estate. It had already entered the law. The prison cart had not reached the village bridge when hoofbeats thundered behind it. Nathaniel overtook the driver on a black gelding and pulled across the road. "Turn back." The constable tightened the reins. "I have a lawful warrant, Your Grace, and I have just received a decree that may dispossess every family on my estate by noon tomorrow. Miss Whitmore saw evidence concerning it before you removed her." The constable glanced toward Rusk's carriage, following at a slower pace. "Mr. Rusk says she is responsible. Mr. Rusk is no longer the only man whose judgment concerns me." Nathaniel gave the constable a written undertaking, making himself financially responsible for Clara's appearance before the magistrate. It did not erase the accusation, but it returned her to Ashbourne Hall under his custody. He unlocked the iron clasp himself. "This is not an apology," Clara said. "No, it is an admission that I may have allowed the wrong person to control the questions." She rubbed her bruised wrists, then began asking better ones. The 2 London carriages waited before the hall. Inside, a chancery receiver named Mr. Pritchard had spread a mortgage bond across the dining table. It claimed Nathaniel had borrowed £60,000 12 years earlier against the Western farms, the orchards, and all rents collected from 73 tenant holdings. The principal had never been repaid. A court order authorised Pritchard to assume control of the estate's revenue at noon the following day. "The debt is fiction," Nathaniel said. Pritchard's manner remained respectful. "The bond bears your signature and seal. Interest payments were entered annually in your estate accounts." "I made no such payments." Rusk opened a large ledger. They were included among household obligations managed by the late Duke's office. Your Grace rarely examined individual disbursements during those years. Clara saw the skill of the scheme. The false payments were small enough to hide among the estate's considerable expenses. Together they created 12 years of apparent acknowledgement. "And the creditor?" she asked. "The Wexford Agricultural Company," Pritchard replied. Clara had never heard the name, but she recognised the 3 farms listed in the bond. They surrounded the old apiary and the limestone ridge beyond it. The families targeted by the forged eviction orders occupied the only cottages with ancient grazing rights across that land. If those leases remained valid, possession would be disputed. If the tenants had been removed, the entire western tract could pass quietly into one owner's hands. Pritchard showed them the original bond. Its red seal carried the Duke's crest with flawless detail. Unlike the eviction orders, there was no swollen lion's eye or broken channel beneath the crown. Clara bent near it. "Smoke and cloves. This wax was made to smell old," she said. Rusk sighed. "We have heard this performance already. The bond was supposedly sealed 12 years ago, within weeks of the old apiary fire. Whoever made it used smoke-damaged wax to support that date, which confirms its authenticity." Rusk said, "No, it confirms that someone wanted its age noticed." Pritchard folded his hands. "Can you prove the seal was applied more recently?" "Not from the surface." "Then the decree stands." Outside, the receiver's men began placing court notices on the granary mill and rent office. No grain could be sold, no wages distributed, and no tenant payment accepted without Pritchard's approval. Harvest carts stopped in the lanes. By sunset, labourers gathered at the gates, demanding wages. The estate was legally forbidden to release. The established authorities could do nothing quickly. The nearest judge sat 2 days away. The magistrate could investigate Clara's alleged forgery, but lacked power to overturn a chancery decree. Even Nathaniel's title could not dissolve a bond carrying his own signature. "There is one comparison left," Clara said. Nathaniel knew what she meant. His mother's unopened letter remained in the ivory box upstairs. Rusk immediately objected. "That letter concerns the late Duchess's private disgrace. It has no bearing upon this debt. It was sealed during the same week as the bond," Clara said. "Both contain the clove mixture. If the letter was opened and resealed later, the bond may have been produced at the same time. And if you destroy the seal without proving anything, then you will have lost wax. Your Grace is about to lose 73 farms. Nathaniel carried the ivory box into the dining room. His hand shook once as he set it before Clara. For 12 years, he said, I have believed whatever lies inside would prove my mother betrayed this family. Clara looked at him across the table. And that belief made you trust anyone who promised to keep the past locked. His eyes moved toward Rusk. Open it, Nathaniel said. Clara warmed the thinnest blade from her father's medicine chest. Rather than cut through the paper, she slid the point beneath the lower edge of the seal and lifted it a fraction at a time. The outer red wax softened quickly, leaving a greasy shine. Beneath it appeared a second layer. This wax was pale gold clean and scented faintly with roses. The original seal, Clara said. Someone opened the letter, covered the broken wax with the clove mixture, and pressed the crest again. Pritchard leaned closer. Even Rusk could not deny the two distinct layers. Clara separated the seal completely. A narrow fibre remained fixed in the golden wax, while the red layer lifted away. Blue silk. Nathaniel unfolded the letter. Its first page contained the same confession found in Clara's father's chest, but the final sentence ended halfway across the sheet. A cut edge showed that another page had been removed. Clara examined the broken golden wax. The missing page had been folded beneath the first when the original seal was pressed. A fragment of its corner remained trapped inside. On that fragment appeared 3 handwritten characters, G.R. 47. Rusk's expression did not change, but his right hand closed around the edge of the table. Clara remembered the disputed entries in her wax ledger, 4 pounds 12 ounces, repeated 3 times. Not quantities chosen by a beekeeper, but figures copied from payments. The number 47 might refer to another account hidden inside the estate books. We need the ledger containing account 47, she said. Rusk shook his head. No such ledger exists. You answered before His Grace asked you. Silence fell across the room. Nathaniel ordered Pritchard to delay sealing the tenant cottages until the final legal minute. Then he placed Clara's wax ledger, the burned candle, the opened letter, and the mortgage bond under separate locks, with Mrs. Finch and Pritchard witnessing each item. We have until noon tomorrow, he said. What do you require? The old household accounts, every surviving candle made before the apiary fire, and access to the western ridge. The ridge is 6 miles away. Then we leave now. Thunder rolled beyond the windows. Rain had begun over the western farms, and the road would soon become impassable. Nathaniel ordered 2 horses saddled. By trusting an accused woman against his solicitor and a court receiver, he risked confirming every rumour that Ashbourne Hall had fallen under a criminal's influence. Clara took the burned candle and climbed into the saddle. Before the first court seal could dry upon the granary doors, she and the Duke rode toward the abandoned apiary, searching for an account that Rusk claimed had never existed. Rain turned the western road into black mud before Clara and Nathaniel reached the ridge. They left the horses beneath a stand of beech trees and continued on foot toward the ruins of the old apiary. Only stone foundations remained. Brambles covered the collapsed honey house, and 12 years of moss softened the scorched wall. Clara knelt beside the first row of broken hive stands. Why did you ask for the ridge? Nathaniel said. The 3 disputed farms surround it. Whoever created the bond does not merely want rent. He wants this land cleared of tenants with permanent grazing rights. There is nothing here but limestone and abandoned pasture. Then why create £60,000 of false debt to obtain it? Lightning flashed beyond the orchard. Nathaniel looked across the ridge as if seeing his inheritance for the first time, rather than merely possessing it. Clara took the fragment cut from the letter's golden seal. Rain had blurred none of the 3 characters GR47. My father marked wax by forage, she said. But the old Duchess named her hives. Golden Rose, Silver Bell, Queen's Crown. Golden Rose, Nathaniel repeated. GR Hive 47. They searched the ruined rows. Most stones had cracked or sunk, but near the eastern wall Clara found a base carved with a small rose. Beneath the moss, the number 47 remained visible. The hive itself had vanished in the fire. Its stone platform, however, sounded hollow when Nathaniel struck it with his boot. Together they cleared the earth from its sides. Clara found an iron ring buried beneath one corner. Nathaniel pulled, lifting a narrow slab and revealing a cavity lined with brick. Inside lay a copper bee smoker wrapped in rotted oilcloth. Green corrosion coated its lid. Verdigris, Nathaniel said. The same green crescent had been embedded in the wax, sealing the false letter found in Clara's father's chest. Clara opened the smoker. It contained no ash. Instead, a roll of documents had been protected inside a tin sleeve, along with a small cake of smoke-darkened wax tied in faded blue silk. The uppermost paper was a duplicate page from the Duchess's household accounts. Account 47 listed payments to the Wexford Agricultural Company for geological consultation and surveying services. Beside each sum, the late Duchess had written a question mark. Beneath it lay a survey of the Western Ridge. Nathaniel read the final notation aloud. Coal seam estimated at 400,000 tons. The abandoned pasture was worth more than the bond, the farms, and perhaps Ashbourne Hall itself. A second sheet showed that the Wexford Company had been registered by a London attorney named Samuel Rusk, Gideon's elder brother, Nathaniel said. He told me Samuel died without leaving property. He did not need to leave property. He needed to leave a company whose ownership could be concealed. The final document was the missing second page of the Duchess's letter to Clara Whitmore. Nathaniel's hands became still as he read. His mother had discovered that Gideon Rusk was moving estate funds through account 47 to finance private surveys. She feared he intended to fabricate a debt, seize the ridge, and discredit anyone who questioned the accounts. She had asked Josiah to preserve wax from the old apiary, because Rusk had begun purchasing clove oil, tallow, and sealing resin through the household office. At the bottom she had written, "If the letter reaching you lacks this page, trust neither my confession nor any seal laid over smoke-darkened wax. I shall send the duplicate by Agnes Finch." Nathaniel lowered the paper. "She told me she was innocent," he said. "I asked why the accounts and letters contradicted her. She would not name Rusk because he threatened to accuse my sister's husband of sharing the fraud. I called her silence another lie. Clara said nothing. The night she died, she asked me to come to her room. I sent word that I would speak to her when she was prepared to tell the whole truth." His voice roughened. There was no following morning. Rain struck the ruined stones around them. Nathaniel had built 12 years of control upon the belief that trust had humiliated him when his refusal to trust had denied his mother her final chance to be heard. "That grief explains why you feared deception," Clara said. "It does not excuse what you did to me. I know. You ordered my livelihood burned. You placed me in irons before the people whose respect feeds my mother and me. Then you allowed those irons to be closed again. I know that too." She expected a promise of restitution, perhaps an apology shaped to end discomfort. Instead, he folded the Duchess's letter carefully and said, "If we save the estate, I will correct the accusation wherever it was heard. If we lose it, I will still do so. Your innocence is not payment I may withhold until you rescue me." The words did not erase the bruises on her wrists. They did, however, mark the first time he had separated justice from what Clara could provide him. She examined the smoke-darkened wax cake. Its blue ribbon matched the fibre trapped inside the Duchess's original golden seal. More importantly, the wax bore the same black flecks and clove scent as the mortgage bond. But the cake had been cut years ago with Josiah's distinctive three-notched knife mark. "This is our comparison," she said. "My father preserved the adulterated batch before the apiary burned." Nathaniel looked toward the storm-dark road. "Will it stop the receiver?" "It proves the mixture existed 12 years ago, not that the mortgage was sealed recently. We still need to show when the bond was made." Clara held the bond's copied details in her memory. Its wax had looked aged, but its blue silk fibre was bright. The old ribbon around the preserved cake had faded almost grey. "The silk," she said. "The household supplier's records may show when the newer ribbon was purchased. Those records are kept in Rusk's office. Then we must reach them before he understands what we found." Nathaniel removed his coat and wrapped the documents and wax inside it, protecting them from the rain. They placed the bundle in the tin sleeve and carried it between them. As they emerged from the ruins, a horse moved among the beech trees. Peter Lyle sat beneath the branches, staring directly at the open cavity under Hive 47. Clara called his name. He wheeled his horse and fled toward Ashbourne Hall. Nathaniel ran for their mounts, but Lyle already had half a mile's advantage. By the time Clara reached the road, the clerk's figure had disappeared into the storm. Their proof was real, but still fragile. And Rusk now knew exactly what they had recovered, and how little time remained to destroy the records that could authenticate it. Nathaniel and Clara rode hard, but Peter Lyle reached Ashbourne Hall first. Smoke was already pouring from the estate office when they entered the courtyard. Servants formed a line from the pump, passing buckets through the rain. Flames consumed the shelves where household invoices, supplier receipts, and correspondence records had been stored. "The ribbon accounts," Clara said. Nathaniel dismounted before his horse had fully stopped. He and 2 footmen forced the office door open, but heat drove them back. By the time the fire was controlled, the past 6 years of purchasing records had become black pulp. Lyle had disappeared. Rusk stood beneath the portico beside Mr. Pritchard. "My clerk was seen leaving the northern gate. He set the fire after admitting Miss Whitmore instructed him to destroy the records. He watched us open Hive 47, Nathaniel said. He returned to warn you." Rusk's expression conveyed injured loyalty. "Warn me of what?" Nathaniel removed the tin sleeve from inside his coat. The documents were damp, but readable. Pritchard examined the Duchess's missing page, the survey, and the duplicate account. "These are serious," the receiver said, "but none bears an independent filing mark. Unless authenticated, they may be private copies or recent fabrications." "The wax cake was preserved 12 years ago," Clara said, "by your father, according to a letter conveniently discovered in a cavity known only to you." Rusk gestured toward her. She possessed wax pigments, carving tools, and the late Duchess's correspondence. Now she produces papers absolving both herself and her father. Nathaniel stepped between them. "You will address her with respect, and you will surrender the estate by noon, because you mistake fascination for judgment." The words reached the tenants gathered beyond the portico. Their anxious murmurs spread through the courtyard. Rusk raised his voice. His Grace removed an accused forger from lawful custody, rode alone with her to a remote ruin, and returned carrying the precise evidence required to defeat a valid bond. Can any reasonable man fail to question it? Clara saw how completely the situation favoured him. Truth did not merely require evidence. It required evidence whose journey could be explained. Mrs. Finch could confirm the Duchess intended to send a duplicate page, but she had not seen Josiah place it beneath Hive 47. The documents had passed through 12 unwitnessed years before Clara found them. Pritchard placed the papers in his case. "I will preserve these for examination, but I cannot suspend the decree upon them alone." A magistrate's carriage entered the courtyard. Rusk had sent for him before the fire was extinguished. The magistrate brought a second warrant for Clara's arrest, now including destruction of estate records and conspiracy to obstruct a court order. He also carried a notice requiring Nathaniel to explain why he had interfered with her earlier detention. If Miss Whitmore returns to the village gaol, Nathaniel said she will be unable to assist in examining the bond. "That is not a legal consideration," the magistrate replied. "It is now." Nathaniel called for his steward and dictated a personal recognizance of £20,000, secured not by the mortgaged Western Farms, but by Ashbourne House in London and the unencumbered Eastern estate. If Clara fled or failed to appear, he would lose property that had belonged to his family for generations. Even Clara stared at him. "You cannot wager that for me. I am not wagering upon affection," he said for everyone to hear. "I am answering for the consequences of my own judgment. I placed Miss Whitmore in danger by condemning her before the evidence was tested. I will not repeat that act merely because correcting it now has become expensive." The magistrate reluctantly accepted the bond. Nathaniel then ordered Rusk removed from his position as estate solicitor. Rusk bowed. "As you wish. But the Wexford Company appointed me its local representative this morning. When the decree takes effect, I will administer the Western holdings on its behalf." At 11 o'clock, Pritchard formally sealed the rent office and granary. Wages remained unpaid. Harvest grain stood beneath wet canvas, while tenants watched the Duke's authority pass into the receiver's hands. Rusk appeared to have won. In the abandoned schoolroom, Clara laid the preserved wax cake beside a written description of the mortgage seal. The bond itself remained locked in Pritchard's document case, and he would permit no further cutting without a compelling reason. Nathaniel stood at the window. The supplier ledger is gone. Lyle is gone. The documents from the hive cannot be independently dated. And at noon, Rusk controls the ridge. I can send to London and challenge the decree. By the time the court answers, the company may sell the mineral rights and claim it acted lawfully. He turned. Then we have failed. Clara looked through the rain toward her apiary. Labourers had again stacked straw near the hives, waiting for Rusk's original destruction order to be enforced. Every hive. That had always troubled her. If he needed only to destroy stored wax, burning the workshop would have been enough. Living colonies produced new wax. They could not prove what had happened 12 years earlier, unless the decisive wax was not 12 years old. Clara took her father's magnifying lens from the medicine chest. She examined the preserved cake. Smoke flecks, blue fibre, and dark grains from the old rose beds appeared inside it. Then she remembered the mortgage seal. Beneath its polished red surface she had seen a single bright crimson grain. She had mistaken it for pigment. 4 years earlier, the Western tenants had begun planting sainfoin as fodder. Its pink blossoms now covered the ridge each June, and Clara's bees carried its red pollen into every recent summer rendering. No sainfoin had grown at Ashbourne 12 years ago. Rusk had mixed a portion of smoke-damaged old wax with fresh wax stolen from Clara's stores. The old material supplied the convincing scent and ash. The new material made the seal pliable enough to press cleanly. That was why he needed her hives burned. Not because they had produced the false wax alone, but because they could produce the comparison-proving part of it was recent. "We have not failed," Clara said. Nathaniel came to the table. "Rusk's arrogance gave us what the destroyed ledger cannot. He wants everyone to believe the seal is 12 years old. Tomorrow, before the tenants and the receiver, ask him to explain why the smoke and cloves prove its age. And after he commits himself, we make him authorize the seal to be opened." Clara looked toward the apiary, where thousands of living witnesses waited behind the rain. "Then I show the room a flower that did not exist here when he claims the bond was made." Before dawn, Clara moved the evidence beyond Rusk's reach. Under Mr. Pritchard's supervision, 2 living hives were carried into the locked chapel yard, Thomas Reed and Mrs. Finch witnessed the transfer, and the receiver placed his own paper seals across the gate. Clara then cut fresh wax from both colonies, wrapped each sample separately, and asked Pritchard to sign across the folds. The preserved cake from Hive 47 remained inside his document case. The burned candle, the Duchess's opened letter, and the altered wax ledger were secured in separate compartments. No single person possessed every key. Nathaniel stationed his own guards around Clara's mother and the tenants whose cottages stood upon the western ridge. "You expect Rusk to threaten them?" he asked. "I expect him to use whatever remains unprotected." At 10 o'clock, Thomas Reed arrived carrying a folded receipt. 4 years earlier, he and the Cooper brothers had jointly purchased sainfoin seed from a merchant in York. The office's copy had burned, but Thomas had kept his own because Rusk later refused to reimburse him. "The first field flowered the following June," Thomas said. "Miss Whitmore moved 2 hives to the ridge because the bees favoured it." Pritchard examined the merchant's stamp and added the receipt to his case. By 11, the great hall was filled. The magistrate sat beside the receiver. The dispossessed families stood near the front while labourers, servants and tenants crowded the doors. The court decree, the mortgage bond and the Wexford Company's claim lay upon the central table. Rusk entered last, dressed in black, and carrying the confidence of a man who believed procedure had already delivered his victory. "This gathering has no legal authority to overturn the decree," he announced. "No," Pritchard said, "but as receiver, I may delay execution if fraud is demonstrated in my presence." Rusk turned toward Clara. "By an accused forger, by evidence," Nathaniel replied. Rusk addressed the tenants before Clara could speak. He described the brass crest found in her satchel, the clove oil and blue ribbon in her father's chest, the practice impressions, and the tool capable of correcting a defective seal. He reminded them that the supplier records had burned only after Clara began demanding access to them. "She asks you to believe every object found in her possession was planted," he said, "while every object she discovers in secret must be accepted as authentic." The argument was powerful because much of it was true. Clara waited until he finished. "You say I forged the eviction orders and the mortgage bond. I say the evidence permits no other reasonable conclusion. The eviction seals were made with an inaccurate brass copy. The bond carries a flawless impression. Why would I practice upon 3 families with a defective stamp, then somehow obtain access to the Duke's authentic silver matrix? You had accomplices inside the house. Name one." Rusk looked toward the absent Peter Lyle. "My former clerk appears to have assisted you, the same clerk who removed evidence from a locked cabinet, set fire to your records, and rode 6 miles through a storm to warn you that Hive 47 had been opened. That is your account of his movements." Nathaniel called the porter and 2 stable boys. Each confirmed that Lyle had left shortly before the office fire. The boys had seen mud from the western road covering his horse's legs. Clara placed the Duchess's letter before the room. Its seal lay divided into the pale golden layer and the red clove-scented covering. This letter was opened and resealed. "Mrs. Finch, did the Duchess instruct you to deliver a duplicate page to my father?" The older woman stepped forward. Her voice trembled, but it did not fail. "Yes." "Her Grace," said Mr. Rusk, had altered the accounts and would destroy anything carrying her true words. "I carried the papers to Mr. Whitmore on the morning of the fire. Did my father hide them beneath Hive 47? I saw him place the copper smoker inside the stone base. I helped him lower the slab." Rusk's face remained controlled. A loyal servant repeating a dead woman's fears proves no mortgage was forged. "No," Clara said, "but it explains the custody of the documents you called recent fabrications." She showed the court receiver the survey of the coal seam and the Wexford registration in Samuel Rusk's name. "Your brother created the company that now claims the Western Ridge. My brother served many clients. And you knew the ridge contained coal. I knew surveys had been conducted. Then why did you tell His Grace yesterday that the land contained nothing but abandoned pasture?" A murmur passed through the tenants. Rusk's eyes hardened. An imprecise phrase made during a crisis. Clara moved to the timeline. The forged eviction orders targeted the only 3 holdings whose ancient grazing rights crossed the proposed mining tract. The altered inventory substituted dark summer wax for her pale winter batches. Lyle removed those jars after Clara proved the seals contained tallow. The estate office burned after he learned they had found the Duchess's duplicate account. "Coincidence upon coincidence," Clara said, "all benefiting one company." Rusk struck the table with his palm. "None changes the age of the bond. Its wax came from the old apiary fire. The smoke cloves and the Duke's perfect crest establish that it was sealed 12 years ago exactly as dated." Pritchard looked at him. "You state that as the company's representative, I do. And you agree that if the seal contains material that could not have entered Ashbourne wax 12 years ago, the bond's stated execution would be false?" Rusk glanced at Clara's magnifying lens. Contempt overcame caution. "Certainly. But she will find soot, old rose pollen, clove oil, and nothing else. I consent to the seal being cut so this spectacle may end." Clara heard the error. He had not merely predicted old wax. He had named what should be inside it, including rose pollen invisible on the bond's surface. Only someone familiar with the preserved cake from the burned apiary could know that detail. Pritchard recorded Rusk's statement and placed the mortgage bond upon a white porcelain plate. Clara warmed her narrowest blade. Nathaniel stood behind her, close enough to support, but making no attempt to guide her hands. She sliced through the center of the red seal. The outer layer fractured. Beneath the smoke-darkened surface, a softer band of golden wax appeared. Clara lifted one translucent shaving and placed it under her father's lens. Black soot marked the old portion. A faded blue fibre crossed the middle, and inside the newest layer rested a single crimson grain, shaped like the keel of a flower. Thomas Reed leaned forward. Rusk stopped breathing. Clara adjusted the lens toward the morning light, ready to name the one thing that could not possibly have existed in Ashbourne wax when the mortgage was supposedly sealed. Sainfoin, Clara said. Thomas Reed placed his seed receipt beside the bond. We first planted it 4 years ago. Clara opened the 2 packets of fresh apiary wax witnessed and sealed by Pritchard that morning. Under her father's lens, both contained crimson grains, identical to the one inside the mortgage seal. This bond is dated 12 years ago, she said, but part of its wax was produced after sainfoin began flowering on the western farms. Someone mixed fresh Ashbourne wax with smoke-damaged wax from the old apiary. The old portion supplied soot cloves and the appearance of age. The new wax made the mixture soft enough to receive a perfect impression. Pritchard examined all 3 samples. Their matching crimson grains were visible beneath the lens. The room moved from skepticism into silence. Rusk recovered first. She could have inserted that shaving after cutting the seal. You authorized the cutting, Pritchard said. The bond remained in my locked case overnight, and I placed it upon the plate myself. The flower may have grown here earlier. Thomas shook his head. My father managed those fields before me. There was no sainfoin. The Cooper brothers and Mrs. Hale confirmed it. The merchant's dated receipt established when the seed arrived. Clara lifted the divided seal. The construction explains everything. The smoke-darkened material came from the batch preserved after the old apiary fire. Its old rose pollen and faded silk appear in the center, but the outer layer contains recent sainfoin pollen and bright blue ribbon from the current household supply. She turned toward Rusk. You knew the preserved cake contained rose pollen before it was opened in this room. You named it yourself. Peter Lyle saw us recover that cake, then rode directly back to you. He told you what we had found. Rusk's composure finally fractured. A guess proves nothing. Then consider the rest. Clara placed the altered inventory beside her ledger. Rusk's office had changed her pale winter wax into dark summer wax, so the missing quantities could be blamed upon her. Lyle removed the jars after she demonstrated the discrepancy. The forged eviction orders used a crude copy of the ducal crest because they were trials. Rusk needed to learn whether documents carrying Nathaniel's authority would be enforced without anyone consulting him. When Clara identified the imperfect impressions, Rusk planted the correction punch in her father's chest. He also planted clove oil ribbon practice seals and the false letter accusing Josiah of destroying evidence. The green mark in that false seal came from the copper smoker beneath hive 47, Clara said. You used material taken from the old cache because you believed its age would make the letter convincing. Mrs. Finch identified the original golden seal on the Duchess's true letter. Its faded blue fibre matched the ribbon around Josiah's preserved wax cake. The later red covering contained tallow and cloves, the same mixture used on the mortgage bond. Nathaniel brought his silver matrix forward. Recent clove wax remained trapped in the lion's mane. Only 3 men possessed keys to the cabinet, he said. I did not use the seal. Rusk controlled one key, and Lyle controlled another. Pritchard closed the Wexford document case. The mortgage cannot be enforced. I am suspending the receivership and referring the bond to the court as evidence of fraud. The great hall erupted. Rusk moved toward the side door, but the magistrate ordered the constables to stop him. "You cannot establish that I made the bond," Rusk said. "At worst, Lyle acted without my knowledge." Clara faced him across the same table where her satchel had been emptied before the tenants. "Lyle could steal wax and use your key. He could copy entries and carry jars. But he could not create the motive." She placed the Western survey over the 3 disputed leases. The coal seam ran beneath every holding Rusk had attempted to clear. Wexford belonged to his brother's dormant company. Account 47 showed estate money financing its original surveys, and the Duchess's missing page recorded her discovery of his plan. 12 years earlier, Rusk had intercepted her warning to Josiah, removed the second page, and resealed the letter. He arranged the apiary fire to destroy the wax and duplicate accounts. Mrs. Finch and Josiah saved both. After the Duchess died and Nathaniel closed her room, Rusk buried false payments throughout the estate books until he could fabricate a matured debt large enough to transfer the entire ridge. The recent eviction orders removed the tenants whose ancient rights could obstruct mining. Burning Clara's hives would destroy the source of the fresh wax and prevent comparison with the mortgage seal. Rusk's fatal mistake had been contempt. He understood documents, titles, and courts, but assumed a beekeeper's knowledge could never carry authority in any of them. The magistrate charged him with conspiracy, forgery, fraud, evidence, destruction, and procuring false accusations. By evening, Peter Lyle was detained at the Northern Toll Road. Faced with responsibility for the office fire and forged entries, he agreed to surrender the cabinet key and describe Rusk's instructions. His testimony strengthened a case Clara had already proved without him. The Wexford Company's claim collapsed. Its remaining assets were frozen pending restitution to the estate and the displaced tenants. Mrs. Hale the Reeds and the Cooper brothers received written confirmation that their leases had never been lawfully terminated. The granary reopened before sunset, and every labourer was paid. Nathaniel then summoned the tenants to the great hall once more. Clara stood beside the central table, not restrained behind it. "I accused Miss Whitmore publicly," he said. "I ordered the destruction of her livelihood, permitted her imprisonment, and treated her knowledge as suspicious only because it contradicted men whose rank resembled my own. Her innocence does not depend upon her saving this estate. It existed when I refused to see it." He cleared Josiah Whitmore's name from every estate record. He transferred the apiary cottage and surrounding orchard to Clara as her separate property, free of rent and beyond the control of any future husband. A portion of all mineral income from the Western Ridge was placed in a tenant trust, and no mining could begin without protection for the farms and water. Nathaniel offered Clara a formal position overseeing the trust and agricultural accounts. She accepted, but only after revising the terms and adding her own salary. 6 months later, the burned hive stand had been rebuilt. Clara worked beneath the apple blossoms while Nathaniel waited outside the apiary fence. He no longer entered merely because the land had once belonged to him. "May I come closer?" he asked. "If you stand still when they approach. I have learned that lesson." A bee landed upon his sleeve. Nathaniel obeyed without flinching. He had courted Clara without secrecy and without asking gratitude for justice he had owed her. When he finally spoke of marriage, he brought no command, family settlement, or prepared announcement. "I would like a life in which you continue correcting me," he said. "That sounds less romantic than you believe. It is the most honest promise I possess." Clara looked toward the hives he had once ordered burned. Their bees moved freely between her orchard and his gardens, belonging wholly to neither and sustaining both. "I will consider it," she said. "For 1 year." Nathaniel smiled. "Then I will spend 1 year deserving consideration." She placed the apiary key in his open palm, not surrendering it, but allowing him to hold it while she repaired a frame. When she finished, she took it back, and he released it without hesitation. Once his men had closed iron around her wrists while he destroyed what gave her independence. Now he stood quietly among the bees, trusted with her key, only for as long as she chose.